Hi, I'm Jim Kavanagh, also known online as The Polemicist. My Substack and social media links are below. Welcome to today's video, where I'm going to talk a bit about the ongoing crisis in Gaza. I want to say, first of all, what a horror we are watching. I really can't stand it. I've been committed to this Palestinian cause for decades, ever since I overcame my submersion in the dominant righteous Zionism ideology and came to understand Israel and Zionism for the unacceptable settler colonial project it is. I was present at the Palestinian elections in 1996 and in 2006 when Hamas was elected in Gaza in an election that all international and American observers found to be a model of transparent, honest democracy. I've written about Palestine and Zionism many times, about the USS Liberty, about Rachel Corrie, about the Israeli attacks on Gaza in 2014, 2018, 2021. I thought that the Great March of Return in 2018 was such a startling and beautiful action of nonviolent Palestinian resistance, such a blatant demonstration of Israel's gratuitous cruelty, that it would surely wake Americans up to and turn them against the historically and ethically unacceptable Zionist colonial project. Of course, it didn't do that. Too many self-identified leftists were still content to keep the issue of Zionism and Palestine in the drawer and to continue to pretend that it was possible to be progressive except Palestine. Now we are witnessing, incredibly, something much worse, an ongoing genocidal ethnic cleansing carried out via the deliberate demolishment of residential neighborhoods, hospitals, ambulances, schools, and UN facilities, and the deliberate slaughter of doctors, journalists, and workers, and en masse children. It does seem now that, given the ubiquitousness of social media, that has had an effect. People have seen what's going on, and it is turning large numbers of people who are seeing this happen and seeing it intensify day after day. Today, it got worse. Today, they dropped a blade bomb on a Palestinian hospital parking lot, which shredded the legs of innocent people harboring at the hospital. So it's turned large numbers of people who are seeing this happen against what is clearly recognizable colonialist violence. It's certainly done that for the majority of people in the world who already knew better about what Zionism was than most Americans. And it seems to have turned a corner in the political consciences of Americans too, with tens of thousands of people taking to the streets in cities all over the country in solidarity with Palestine. It seems, and I hope it's true, that a critical mass of American leftists have come to understand, in a way that's irreversible, that the issue of the colonialist project and the subjugation of the Palestinians cannot be blithely disregarded as long as we get everything right on whatever else your favorite issue is. What actual effect that will have on the fate of the people of Gaza over the next few weeks and months, I don't know. I'm hopeful, but I'm very skeptical. I do know that it has increased Americans' consciousness of and division over this issue, both of which are very good things. We have to take our sides on this and fight it out. We cannot passively witness the ongoing slaughter as if it's an avoidable discomfort. It's happening. The United States is not witnessing. It is, with its Israeli partner, doing this. We have to confront and defy and, as much as possible, change the mindset that makes it possible. I know I'm not alone in saying I can't stand it. So I've written 2 articles about this Gaza crisis. One called First and Foremost, Colonialism Must End, and another about how this situation is likely to lead to a wider conflict called Israel's Gaza Solution, War on Iran. In this video, I want to focus on how the U.S. is approaching the issue of what Gaza will look like after Israel ends its military attack, if it ever does. In this respect, The crucial thing that runs throughout is that the U.S. presumes the inevitability and necessity of Gaza remaining under Israeli colonial control. Two elements of that situation are very important to understand, and I think kind of difficult to understand for people who think in terms of the intelligent, self-interested game of political power. In such a realpolitik framework, one can envision some delimited, quote, Jewish state of Israel existing alongside an independent Gaza or Palestinian state as a result of some bargaining process between parties with different legitimate interests. This is the framework that Western liberal Zionists want to think and want you to think governs this situation and in which a solution could be, quote, worked out. But fundamental element number one, the Israelis do not approach this situation in those terms. They do not understand themselves or their antagonists, the people of Gaza and the Palestinian people, or the relationship between them and their antagonists in those terms. They understand that relationship in colonialist terms as a non-negotiable conflict between two absolutely different kinds of people, one superior to the other. We see this very clearly in Netanyahu's casting the Palestinians as Amalekites, the tribe whose every man, woman, child, and animal God commanded the Israelites to kill. This is a situation outside of the rational, even the normally non-rational terms of the other political power struggles American experts think they can always manage, and they don't even do a good job with them. Israel's mission in Gaza right now is not to defeat Hamas. It is to restore the Israeli military's, quote, aura of power and the Jewish colonialists' sense of omnipotence over the Palestinian people that was shaken by the October 7th attack. That can only be done via an extraordinary display of deliberately excessive cruelty. The Israelis are deliberately targeting children, ambulances, hospitals, and doctors' families, journalists and their families, and other such helpless victims in order to demonstrate their power and ruthlessness, and to terrify the surviving population into fleeing. They are, and they say they are, deliberately killing tens of thousands of people, rendering Gaza uninhabitable for human life, and making it impossible for millions not to leave. As in 1948, their objective is extermination and expulsion in both Gaza and the West Bank, where over 150 people have been killed in the past few weeks. Israel is in effect saying they are done with the Palestinians, and they really don't care whether anybody likes that or not. Israel's assault on Gaza is not a normal military or political action. It's a Foucaultian theater of discipline whose audience is not just the Palestinians, but the whole world. The excessive cruelty is not an accident. It is the point. The excess is the point. We have to understand the implications of this. Neither Netanyahu or any other Israeli leader is going to accept a solution in Gaza that removes Gaza from the colonialist framework. Israel knows that any solution that eliminates or even weakens Zionist colonial control of Gaza would fatally weaken the Zionist project as a whole. They will literally blow up the whole world to prevent that. The second fundamental element of this is that Netanyahu is right. In all his interactions with Blinken over this, Netanyahu has the posture of the man in charge who knows that, to quote him, quote, America is a thing that can be easily moved in the right direction. They won't get in the way. And, quote, we have the Senate, the Congress, and a strong Jewish lobby on our side. America won't force us into anything. He is right. The United States will not prevent Israel from doing anything it wants and will support Israel no matter what it does. For the reasons Netanyahu gave, and also because American and Western leaders have completely swallowed the notion that it's a good and righteous and necessary thing that the world's Jews have a global safe room for themselves. This is Zionist lifeboat ethics. Jews are unique and eternal targets, Israel is the lifeboat, and tough luck for whomever they throw out to save themselves. Damn right we deserve to be in that boat more than Palestinian Arabs. Your refusal to recognize this proves that you, too, really hate us and want to drown us. American and Western leaders believe this in their hearts and believe that believing this makes them good people. It also just happens to garner them enormous financial support in capitalist electoral systems. So, with great self-satisfaction, American and Western politicians embrace the Zionist ethic so nicely put by Nathan Robinson. Quote, any amount of Palestinian death, however large, is justified to prevent any amount of risk to Israelis, however small. Because of these two fundamental elements, Israel's adamant insistence on its colonialist prerogative and the United States' complete acceptance thereof, the U.S. will never propose or accept any outcome in Gaza that would remove Gaza from Israel's colonial control. We now have the specter of the American Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, on his third or fourth visit to Israel, trying to persuade Netanyahu to take more steps to protect civilians and allow humanitarian aid into the Strip. Again, the posture of the principals in this situation is important. Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States, approaches Netanyahu in the posture of a supplicant. And as Axios reported, Blinken's message was, we don't want to stop you, but help us help you get more time. In other words, we're here to help you. It was essentially Blinken saying, please, sir, I don't mean to disturb you, but I have some suggestions that just might make things go a little easier for you as well as for us, if it may please you. Netanyahu's response to the representative of the most powerful country in the world, the country upon whose military, financial, and political support he depends, is to tell Blinken, nope, quote, we are continuing in full force, end quote. In fact, as you are sitting here, begging us to be more humane, we are bombing more hospitals and ambulances. So essentially, Netanyahu is saying, we're going to do whatever we want, and you're going to support us in whatever we do. To which Blinken replied, essentially, yes, sir, and I'll make sure to tell the world that. The latest plaint from the Biden administration, that it feels Israel has been too cavalier in killing civilians, and that it lacks a coherent endgame, quote unquote, but that the Biden administration, the United States government, is unable to, quote, exert significant influence to change Israelis' behavior, is insulting to our intelligence bullshit. And everybody knows it. Israel, the Zionist project, depends completely on American military, financial, political, and diplomatic power. The United States could withhold the weapons it's providing for Israel's genocidal assault on Gaza and force it to accept an endgame status for Gaza that would allow its people to live reasonable lives without being locked in what the Israeli Jewish scholar Baruch Kimmerling called the largest concentration camp ever to exist. The United States could restrain Israel's behavior with one phone call. The United States could do that, but it's not, and it won't, because Israel does not want it. Any externally imposed limit on Israeli control of Gaza would be a model of Palestinian independence and Zionist restriction that would threaten the Zionist colonial project as a whole. And protecting that is the U.S.'s highest priority. It's important to understand how true that is for American leaders. Israel does what it does in Gaza and elsewhere because it's confident it has the unconditional support of the United States. So what are the prospects for Gaza's status after Israel has finished its military campaign? What are the prospects for Israel stopping its military campaign? Under what conditions would it? We know Israel's planned and preferred status for Gaza: expel all the Palestinian Arabs to tent cities in the Sinai and or distribute them like party favors to European and North American countries. Really, I can't make this up. Ram Ben Barak, the former deputy director of the Mossad, says, quote, let us distribute them all over the world. There are 2.5 million Gazans. Each country takes 25,000, 100 countries. it's better to be a refugee in Canada than in Gaza. It's outrageous that there'll be any such settler colonialist proposal put forward in the 21st century. But here we are. And kid yourself not, this is a serious proposal that the United States, on behalf of Israel, is going to keep trying to sell to Arab countries and to the world. In fact, the United States is making offers that are going to be hard for some countries to refuse, like the offer of paying off Egypt's foreign debt. So far, Egypt and all other Arab countries have adamantly refused this proposal. But I don't think the United States will give up on it, and I think it come up with some other sweeteners to make it palatable. Because here's the problem. There's no other proposal that any other countries would accept that Israel would accept. Let's recognize two things. One, there seems to be an unquestionable presumption that the U.S. will lead the process of defining whatever Gazan polity emerges if and when Israel decides to stop its military assault. And two, the U.S. presumptively rules out the option that Gaza might actually govern itself. The U.S. will insist that it be a polity defined, first of all, by Israel's conditions, which will include Israel's prerogative to use any military force in Gaza anytime it wants for any reason. That neat set of conditions means that any central authority in Gaza will be an Israeli colonial proxy. Here are some of the alternatives that have been proposed by the United States. One, bring in the Palestinian Authority to run Gaza. This seems to be Blinken's favorite current plan. The PA is certainly experienced in the role of being Israel's colonial proxy in the West Bank. But neither the PA nor Israel really want this. The PA knows it will be resented as Israel's quisling partner in Gaza. The PA and Israel know that will give rise to resistance movements that the PA won't be able to control. And Israel does not want Gaza and the West Bank to be united under one Palestinian political authority. That would be too suggestive of a Palestinian state. So even Blinken feels he has to modify this plan, admitting that maybe, quote, other countries and international agencies would likely play a role in security and governance in the interim. Other countries, of course, including Israel. So what about bringing in some consortium of international agencies and or the UN to run Gaza? But none of these institutions are really designed for the purpose of administering all the affairs of a polity of 2 million people. The other aspect of that alternative that Blinken has suggested, bringing in, quote, peacekeepers from Arab countries to take security responsibility for Gaza, is a recipe for those countries' political suicide. Any Arab country agreeing to keep Gaza pacified for Israel would face the wrath of its own people and of resistance groups that would arise within Gaza itself. It seems that Blinken broached this possibility in his meeting with Arab countries in Jordan and was told in no uncertain terms, forget about it. So Blinken now says, quote, Gaza cannot continue to be run by Hamas, end quote. And trying to sound all balanced, he also says, it's also clear that Israel cannot occupy Gaza, end quote. But of course, Israel gets an out. Quote, the reality is, Blinken says, there may be a need for some transition period, end quote. That is, a period in which Israel can occupy Gaza, just for a while. Guess who'll get to decide when the transition period is over, and transition to what? Netanyahu has, again, spoken up, showing who's in charge, and rebuffed any of Blinken's suggestion of what Israel cannot do. He now says that Israel will control Gaza indefinitely. Quote, I think Israel will, for an indefinite period, have security responsibility, end quote, Netanyahu told ABC News. And other Israeli politicians say that whether or not Israel, quote, fully reoccupies the Gaza Strip, they'll decide. Israel, quote, must have permanent and complete security control of the occupied territory, end quotes. Interesting, the use of the term occupied territory. This is as reported in The Guardian. As Netanyahu advisor Mark Regev says, even if Israel is not always, quote, present, it has permanent control. Quote, we can go in and we can go out. That's the military prerogative of interference that I mentioned above. There's no avoiding the fact that the solution to the Gaza problem is the political solution to the Palestinian problem. That is, independence, freedom, and justice for the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank and Green Line Israel. There's no avoiding the fact that without such a solution, any authority externally imposed on Gaza will be perceived as and will be a vehicle for enforcing Israel's colonial rule, whether directly or by proxy. No such externally imposed authority will be able to govern effectively or to prevent the emergence of resistance groups like Hamas. Whatever delusional American diplomats like Blinken may think or say, Israel is making it clear that any third party administering Gaza will be a front for permanent Israeli control. Israel, in fact, realizes that the only possible governing authority in Gaza that could be as ruthless as Israel needs to maintain its colonial control of Gaza's 2 million people is Israel itself. And even Israel is reluctant to take on that task, which it has just again learned is impossible. Israel is again in the zugzwang position, where it's necessary to take an action, but that action will not work. That means Israel is not going to stop killing Gazans and demolishing Gaza until enough Palestinians are dead or distributed, enough to make Gaza a safe zone for Israel. Israel is certainly not going to accept some half-assed Gaza option cooked up by American diplomats to save the political asses of American and Western politicians, an option that no country in the world will be foolish enough to take on. This is more American delusional diplomacy. Believe the Israelis. Israel is done with the Palestinians and wants them gone. It's Nakba 2023. Watch the images of thousands of Palestinians streaming south on foot. 50,000 in one day. None of those people are ever coming back. The, quote, transition period, quote, will be forever. The disgraceful U.S.-Israeli proposal for a 4-hour humanitarian pause of the bombing every day for the specific purpose of letting Gazans flee south is nothing but a way of facilitating orderly ethnic cleansing. The United States is making sure that Israel gets what it wants, anything that it wants. Here's the other hard thing we have to recognize. At this point, the only thing that will stop the extermination and expulsion of the people of Gaza, and of the West Bank for that matter, where a parallel process is now unfolding, is an organized intervention by powerful international actors in defiance of Israel and the United States. An intervention that, however diplomatic its form, must be backed by military force or the threat of military force that cannot be overcome at acceptable cost. Take, for example, the proposal I heard floated some weeks ago that Turkey and Russia might deliver shiploads of humanitarian aid to Gaza under military escort, defying any threat of military attack by Israel or the United States to prevent it. Only something like that will get the necessary amount of humanitarian aid to Gaza that would allow its people to stay where they are and have reasonable lives. Diplomatic force from the UN and countries like Turkey, Russia, China, etc. can have a real effect, but will ultimately be blocked by the United States and ignored by Israel. To be effective, any diplomatic resolution will have to be backed by a military peacekeeping intervention that defies the control of the United States and Israel. Of course, direct military threat or action from Arab countries and or major powers and or from Iran, Hezbollah, or some combination of resistance groups to stop the killing of Palestinian children would force the United States to decide whether it's going to allow Israel to blow up the world to save Zionist colonialism. I can understand the reluctance to do that because the United States will. I can understand that Russia and China may not be willing to risk nuclear war with the United States over a situation in which they have no direct interest, and in which American credibility will be destroyed and their credibility strengthened without taking any such risk. As for Iran, it knows it will be nuclear bombed if it takes any direct military action, although it also knows it might be even if it doesn't. And it has to consider if the slaughter of tens of thousands of Palestinian men, women, and children, and the expulsion of millions is not enough to forcibly challenge the Zionist state, nothing ever will be. Economic force via oil and resource embargoes can also have a real effect. And it's a disgrace that, for all its passionate statements, no Arab countries even seem to be considering this, or any serious action to stop the genocide of their Palestinian brothers and sisters. Unfortunately, I think it's unlikely there will be any such decisive action by any major player. None of them really care as much about protecting the Palestinian people as about their own interests. Of course, that can change in an instant because of the excessive violence of Israel in the United States, and/or because of surprising acts of resistance from ostensibly minor players. For example, an Israeli attack on Lebanon, or a large-scale Hezbollah attack on Israel, and/or attacks on the United States occupation force in Syria, and/or a revolt by Fatah in the West Bank, which has already been threatened by some Fatah fighters. These kinds of actions may provoke more outrageous Israeli massacres and force more powerful third parties to act. It's both doubtful any of that will occur and hard to imagine that it won't. At any rate, there will be no stopping expulsion and extermination of Palestinians without a military defeat of Israel, which means end the United States. Like all such conflicts, the conflict between Israeli colonialism and the Palestinian people will be settled by military political defeat. For the Palestinians to defeat Israel and its sponsor, they, with their allies, must achieve a military and political capitulation based on their own sufficient military and much stronger political force. As Nelson Mandela said, and as he and Vietnam and Afghanistan demonstrated, it always seems impossible until it's done. As I've suggested in my article, that's why Israel will try to preempt any forceful military resistance by having the U.S. join with it in preemptively attacking Iran. The U.S. is accumulating enormous military resources in the region, maybe to persuade Israel it's not necessary to do that, but definitely to join in if Israel does. Israel will not stop unless forced to. The United States will not stop supporting Israel unless forced to. The only political force that could change that latter condition would be a political upheaval in the United States that would result in ending military, financial, and diplomatic support for Israeli colonialism. The chance of that is incalculable. But by all means, let's get that impossible done. The United States is backing away from Ukraine, preparing to accept an enormous defeat for itself and for the military alliance with which it seeks to dominate the world, NATO. It's doing that because it's confronted with a military force it cannot defeat, and because it feels compelled to turn its attention and resources to defend a project even more important to it than preventing NATO's capitulation to Russia. The difference between what it took for the United States to allow Zelensky and Ukraine's defeat and what it would take for the United States to allow Netanyahu and Zionism's defeat is incalculable. Gaza will be ethnically cleansed or free. The Palestinians will be dispersed or Zionism will be defeated. It will be decided by military and political force. There is no other option. We are in a very dangerous situation. I'll just close by saying, above all, right now, do anything you can in any venue that's available to you to support Palestine. Do not be intimidated. Talk right back to phony, gaslighting accusations of anti-Semitism and such. It's the Zionists who should be ashamed of defending what the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem calls, quote, a regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. This is apartheid, end quote. Repeat with emphasis, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like and subscribe to my Substack or to the Rumble or YouTube channel you're watching. All the links are below. Till next time.